Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 78 of Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights. We'll take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them, to compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. We might have a little bit of a shorter one today, just because one covers a lot of species, but that's okay. We'll have a look around and have a good time. How can you not love that? So let's first start off. We've got Microceratus done by Pickle. He always does a wonderful job, so let's have a look at that cute little guy. Look at that cute little guy. So this is, I mentioned Pickle. So Pickle always makes a lot of really awesome paleo edits. So we can look at some of the changes that they've put to this guy here. Let's have a look at, there's got to be one with like the proper colors. I'm pretty sure there's one. There he is. Look at this cute little guy. So this is one of the Dominion, of course, movie colors. Have a look at this guy. Look how cute he is. So this just, as I mentioned, it's a paleo edit. Goes through a lot of the anatomy to make it look a little bit better. So this reflects a lot more of like Microceratus would have actually looked like. Things like its relatives, like gracile ceratops, things like that. So you can see the head's been greatly changed, not quite as so boxy, with a much more accurate beak and the proper eye placement this time. You see a little bit of a frill going on there as well. The fourth finger, also it's got 3 fingers now on the front there. And you also see, I think it might be 4, but yeah, the 4th finger's removed. You can see that quite round body. A bit of a facelift, nice edits to the feet. Kind of hard to see with how small it is, but you can also see that bit of a raised tail. A lot of those early relatives of, ceratopsians, things like Coreoceratops, I believe, had like a raised vertebral bits along here. So I think it's kind of emulated as well. I don't think Gracilloceratops has it, but it makes sense considering, well, Gracilloceratops is what I'm using for reference as Microceratus, because they are quite closely related. But yeah, I don't think there's actually much of a good skeleton. Like Microceratus it often looks quite different, or Asiaceratops as well. So it's one of those things. It's like taxonomy being taxonomy. But yeah, this gives you a good look to what an early-ish ceratopsian would look like before they got all big and got the bigger horns. So yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see this guy getting a paleo edit. He definitely needed some, and Pickle always giving it some love. How can you not love Pickle's mods? So let's see if we can get a slightly better look. Must be able to. Like zoom in a bit. Right, it's as close as I can go. Yeah, real cute. So we're letting them run off and do their thing. Another great Pickle mod. So next up as well, we've got by JWE2 we've got Davidasaurus. So this is a very interesting one. Wonderful guy. So this is Davidasaurus. Let's see if we can get one that's a little bit better posture to talk about. Oh, and we don't want that. I hate how it does that. It's so annoying. But anyway, we'll have a look at you. You're calling. Very interesting posture there. So this is Davidosaurus. So Davidosaurus is actually quite a controversial animal, even though it just looks like your typical stegosaur. It is quite controversial. So it's from the late Cretaceous and has been interpreted as either an ornithischian, so things like a stegosaur, or as a plesiosaur. And it contains the single species Davidosaurus balfourdi and is known for mostly poorly preserved remains from the late Cretaceous of southern India. So it was first described in 1979 by P.M. Yangani and Christian Ayasami, based on the fossils remains of the Pippa Formation in the Chondropology group of southern India during the 1970s, and were discovered in a site west of the village Suratanam. And the Davidosaurus fossils are the first fossils assigned to an ornithischian to actually be reported from India, which is pretty cool. The fossils attributed to the holotype is a partial skull, as long as isolated tooth, sacrum, ilium, ischium, armor plate, and tail spikes, which was pretty, given pretty interesting to give it to a stegosaur. And there's some other bones that have been identified to belong to the same sort of species, another different specimen. And the fossils attributed to Davidasaurus have been, at the time of description, determined not to be warm and indicate they've not been transported during burial, so they tend to be pretty good. The generic name of Davidasaurus comes from Davidasaurus, which is a term you often use for the southern part of India, which the Trichinopoly group comes from. And it says the Davidasaurus lizards, so it names specific lizard from South India. And Balfoldi honours William Thomas Balfoldi, who was actually responsible for pioneering a lot of research into the Cretaceous of southern India, so it's a way to honour him. So as I mentioned, original description, it was thought to be a stegosaur based on many features of the skull. Characteristics quite similar to animals like Kentrosaurus and Stegosaurus. And while they were identified to be diagnostic traits, it differs from a lot of other, at the time, so new species. And what really makes it weird is that if it is a stegosaur, and most recent evidence suggests that it is a very small stegosaur. It would be the smallest known one and one of the oldest. One of the youngest. So the fact that it's estimated to be about 3 meters or 10 feet long would be the smallest known stegosaur. Narrow skull that's about 20 centimeters long, which makes it proportionally smaller than the rest of the other stegosaurs, which is quite interesting. And they had reinforced plates that were between 5 to 25 centimeters high, and the spike was about 15 centimeters and slightly curved. So it bulged to the center of is 1 centimeter. So these would have quite small spikes, which is quite interesting. As I mentioned, quite a small stegosaur. And there was lots of classification debates because of it's poorly preserved. Some would even suggest that there was just a nomenubium, or just something we don't know much about. And Davidasaurus was kind of examined, and actually highly weathered pelvic elements of a plesiosaur. It was suggested that it was actually a plesiosaur because it looked quite weathered. But and then it was formally classified in 1996, pretty much as Stegosauria nomenubium. But it wasn't until about 2017, Galton and Asami actually both referred it to the Stegosaurian classification of Davidasaurus. So it is at the moment now considered as Stegosaurus again. And they show no similarities between the fossils in the original description and the pelvic and hind elements of plesiosaurs. Also know that tooth was also extremely unlikely to come from a plesiosaur. So it is definitely, a stegosaur, at least from the most recent evidence. And no certain or undisturbed stegosaurian fossil remains to be covered from that part of the Cretaceous. So it is a stegosaur. It is definitely the last surviving member of its group. And it would actually be the last known by a time frame of tens to millions of years. So it either suggests that the Stegosaurian fossil record is quite poorly sampled, or that the stegosaurs actually managed to persist in India right to where they would have gone extinct to other places, which is not unlikely. We have a lot of lineages that have done that today. Like a great example, like locally is New Zealand. We've had Tuatara, and a lot of our frog species are pretty much like relics. They would be extinct otherwise. Species can hold out in small areas, so it is not impossible that stegosaurs could have held out in India at the time, especially since this would have been an island at the time. So quite interesting. So this formation is thought to be a Neotropic environment, and it has like lots of marine, marine fossils and things like that. In addition to that, there was like a lot of petrified wood. So even though the animal did not obviously live on this area where it was preserved, it probably like came out in a flood or just washed down a river and got preserved there. It's believed to be a marine environment, but there was like lots of dense vegetation where it lived, so it's meaning that it's not possible that this large animal may have been carried out to sea to be buried. It happens to a lot of large herbivore fossils. And other than Davidasaurus, there's been not many dinosaurs named from this area, but there are scant remains of things like other stegosaurs, or even later stegosaurs, or other things such as ichnofossils and things like that. So it's quite interesting. And there's also some late Cretaceous stegosaur fossils from Australia too, so it could be very interesting. The stegosaurs may have held out a little bit longer than we thought they would have, which is quite interesting. We just need more research. I'm actually kind of leaning towards the poorly sampled hypothesis, considering how often poorly sampled most paleontology things are. And we also have Cretaceous, stegosaurs, ichnofossils, which believed to be stegosaurs. So it could be interesting, I reserve judgment, but I could think that stegosaurs may have held on a little bit longer than we expected. Yeah, really, really cool. Love this reconstruction. I love like the colors on it. I love that. Nice to see a cute little stegosaur. Definitely a big fan. Came out rather well. Trippy did a great job. So we'll let you run off and do your thing. Next up, we've got Hockowl1215. You guys know how much I love Hockowl. And Hockowl has done for us a really interesting animal that I'm really excited to talk about. And we've got a Therapsid, and we have got Moschops. Let's let them separate from each other a little bit. See if we got the Moschops. Let's see if we can get a good. It's kind of awkward just because they come out of the hatchery like that, but it's still really awesome. Look at this guy. So this is Moschops, which is Greek for calf face. So they're an extinct genus of Therapsid that lived during the Guadalupan epoch, about between 265 to 260 million years ago. So that's in the Permian, way before the dinosaurs. So these guys were quite heavily built plant eaters, and they were thought to live like hippopotamuses, potentially partly in the water, though there's not too much evidence to support that. You can also see they have quite short, thick heads and might have actually competed by headbutting each other. And the elbows actually allowed them to walk in a more mammalian-like gait rather than crawling, so they were a little bit more upright, which is quite interesting. And their remains have been found in the Karoo Basin or region of South Africa, belonging to the Tampinocephalus assemblage zone, so around that time. The Karoo Basin is kind of thought it into assemblages where you find the most kind of sort of fossils, so that's how they usually date it. And therapsids such as Moschops are synapsids, so they're actually more closely related to you and I. All mammals are synapsids, so they are more closely related to you and I than they are to a dinosaur. So same with Dimetrodon. So Dimetrodon is more related to you than it is to dinosaurs, so please don't call Dimetrodon a dinosaur. And was the dominant land animals in the Permian period, which ended about 252 million years ago. So these guys didn't live too much before the extinction, big Permian extinction, or the Great Dying, which killed off most of life on Earth. It was the biggest, greatest extinction that the Earth has ever faced. Anyway, so these guys are quite a heavily set dinocephalian synapsids. They measured about 2.7 meters, or about 8.9 feet in long, and weighed on 129 kilograms, or 284 pounds on average, and weighed up to about 327.4 kilograms, or just over 700 pounds maximum. And you can see they got quite short heads, but with broad orbits and heavily short-billed necks. And they were a member of the group, the Tanocephalidae, which is a group of really big synapsids that were almost like the cattle and the big herbivores of their time, the megafauna. They have a tiny opening with a pineal gland, and their orbit is quite broad and deep. That suggests that the skull was narrowed. And their pterygoid arches suggest that these guys had quite heavily built muscles, and they would have been also had these kind of long-crowned, stout teeth that were used for eating plants and eating lots of ferns and cycads. And due to this nutrient-poor diet, they would have to eat a lot, so they would be bulk feeders, so eating as much as they can, and they would need to feed for long periods of time. And the anatomy of this text actually shows that these elbow joints were more widely open the joints more widely, so they can move into a more mammal-like position and help them carry around their massive bodies while feeding. And they actually will allow them to run a little bit, kind of like hippos. They can charge quite fast. These guys would have been kind of like that in that respect. And they also were thought to be subaquatic as well, or semi-aquatic, very similar to hippopotamuses, though there's not too much evidence to suggest that. And they also have rather thick skulls, which has often led to the speculation that they may have head-butted each other. And a 2017 study actually published, it looked like the look at the synchrotron scanning of the skull, that received numerous anatomical adaptations to the central nervous system for the combat with this behavior. So there's lots of adaptations in the skull that does suggest that they would have had this behavior. So they would probably have run up and buddied each other with their skulls. And these guys would have been prey for animals such as the titanosuchids and large stereocephalian species, so things like organops and things like that. And earliest finds, these guys would have been found in the Eka group, in the part of the Karoo supergroup in South Africa, and by Robert Broom. And the geological horizon is dubious. They be thought to be this group in their proximity, the holotype, and there's several topotypes found, so it is quite well known. And there's a few different species described. The most common one, or the first one, is Capenensis, and there's a couple other species that are some we don't. It's like most taxonomy, there's a few different species that we don't really know much about. There hasn't been much study into synapsids compared to like dinosaurs and things like that. But still cool. In terms of classification, these guys have the strong pachycephalized skull and reduced temporal fenestrae, and the species, two species known from the fossil record, M. capenensis and M. copunensis, but two other species were assigned, and their validity is considered dubious. There are other genera that have been lumped into these guys that were thought to be juvenile Sauropods, Moschops, and then so they thought it was a different species, but it turns out just to be babies or juveniles of the species. But yeah, quite cool. Do love to see more synapsids and things. I do think the Paleozoic is so underrated. I'd actually just play a game with Paleozoic animals. I think that'd be quite cool, just because there's so many interesting animals from the Paleozoic, and I think they deserve love. Hopefully, Prehistoric Kingdom, they do want to expand to give us a lot of Paleozoic animals. I think that'd be quite awesome, because there's so many cool animals from that time, and it doesn't get as much love as it should. I really do love the Paleozoic, the time before the dinosaurs. Okay, so let them run off and do their thing. Another great Hockel mod, Hockel always giving us bangers of mods. And I can know they're inside each other, but that's just because of the rig edits. But you can see it's comes from some really awesome colors. Anyway, next up we have got Sauropod. I know everyone loves sauropods. This is by Jojo Chess. We've got Sauroposeidon. So Jojo Cheese, not Chess, was giving us this really awesome Sauroposeidon. I don't think we've had one yet, so it's really cool to have the opportunity to talk about this animal. So we'll let them run off and do their thing. Let's have a look at you. What a beauty. It even dwarfs these bloody Moschops, and they're quite big animals. So here is Sauroposeidon. So Sauroposeidon, which means lizard earthquake god, is after the Greek god Poseidon. These guys are a genus of sauropod dinosaur known from quite a few incomplete specimens, including a bone bed and fossilized trackways that have been found in Oklahoma, Wyoming, and Texas. So a very interesting animal. These guys were first found by four-necked vertebrae in Oklahoma, not far from the Texas border, that date from outcrops from the early Cretaceous, so about 110 million years ago, respectively between the Alpine and Abian stages. These vertebrae were discovered in May 1994 at the Antlers Formation in Otoka, Otoka County, Oklahoma, and they were taken to the Oklahoma Museum in May and August of 1994. And they were thought to be simply too large to be the remains of animals, but due to the state of preservation, they were thought to be tree trunks. And they're actually the longest such bones known in dinosaurs, the vertebrae as well. And then they were published, released in 1899, sort of its own species, which is Sauroposeidon portalis, which was often called, the largest dinosaur ever, but every dinosaur gets called that. The genus name comes for Sauros, lizard, so it's Sauroposeidon. So basically the lizard god, the lizard sea god, who's often associated with earthquakes. And the specific name, Protelestes, comes from ancient Greek's perfect before the end, which shows its kind of status as the last and most specialized giant sauropod known from North America during the early Cretaceous, before they went extinct in America for a bit until Allosaurus came into the place. So due to this, sauropods have been named with various different names and that have been lumped to the genus Sauroposeidon, such as trackways as well. Belacrosaurus, which is thought to be Sauroposeidon. Palaxiosaurus was also thought to be Sauroposeidon. It was based on a partial skull and left maxilla and some vertebrae. And it was distinguished by other sauropods by a lot of things, but then it kind of lumped into Sauroposeidon because a lot of these specimens corresponded to, look a lot like Sauroposeidon. A lot of the diagnostic traits came around. So a lot of other specimens that were other species, like Australocordia and Plesiosaurus and Palaxiosaurus were all lumped into Sauroposeidon because they all matched. It's quite interesting. But yeah, Sauroposeidon is a dinosaur we don't know too much about. So the press in 1999 kind of, gave it the title of the biggest sauropod ever, and is thought to be the tallest dinosaur known, but it was nowhere near as large as animals like Marapunisaurus or Argentinosaurus and things like that. But the original find was they attributed it as a brachiosaur, but now modern interpretations kind of think of it as a stomatosaurian, which is like a late sauropod, an early titanosaur kind of thing. So it would have been not quite like that. The vertebrae were actually quite large, and some of the largest we've seen, about 1.4 meters, which makes it the longest sauropod neck on record. And it was thought to be 18% longer than the cervical ribs, were like about 3 meters, or the normal ribs, which was about 18% longer than those in Titan, but exceeded by those in Mamenchisaurus. So most of the estimates of Sauroposeidon's size are based on Titan, and there hasn't been really many new ones based on its new classification, but size estimates based on Titan estimates to be about 11 to 12 meters in terms of neck length, and then lift its head about 18 meters above the ground, while Sauroposeidon was about 13 meters off the ground. Shoulder height is estimated to be about 6 to 7 meters based on the Brachiosaurid interpretation, and also about 27 to 34 meters based on that as well. In terms of Sauroposeidon's weight, the mass has been estimated between 40 to 60 tons, and then it was actually thought to have quite a gracile neck, or quite a thin neck compared to Titan, so that's kind of brought down a bit. Comparison, Titan may have lived 30-40 tons, and these guys may have been a little bit slimmer, and actually the weights may be a lot less than we thought. So in terms of its paleoecology, these guys are titanosaurs as well. Titanosaurs were quite widespread, and a few specimens actually been found in North America and quite fragmentary, often written juveniles of their species. And most of the surviving sauropods were shrinking to about 15 meters at about 10 tons, and that's why Sauroposeidon, was like, okay, why is this guy still big? So it lived itself on the Gulf of Mexico, which ran through Oklahoma at the time, and then the river delta similar to the Mississippi. It's been found in a few places around the world around the early Cretaceous. These guys would have lived in a large floodplain, and the sea would expand to the north. So this was kind of the beginning of the Western Interior Seaway. This is before it got really big. And it would live with animals such as Acrocanthosaurus, Deinonychus, Temnothosaurus, and the sauropod, Astrodon, and then a few other really cool animals. But yeah, it's nice to see Sauroposeidon finally in the game. Definitely deserves a bit of love. Not an animal we know too much about, but definitely a really awesome name. And still a cool animal. How can you not love Sauroposeidon? And it's got the correct feet too, other than the toes, where we keep on about the toes, but it does have the correct feet. I think that's probably just a texture thing. But yeah, really, really awesome. How can you not love these guys? So we're gonna let them run off and do their thing. So next up, we've got another species here. We have got Guanlong, done by Netraptor, JWE2 and Gojira Chief. So you can see now we've actually got it covered in feathers, which is quite awesome, which is accurate. You can see all these feathers on it. It looks really nice. Definitely a big fan. So this is Guanlong. So Guanlong is an extinct Microceratus or a tyrannosaurid, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Dinosaur from the late Jurassic of China. It was first described in 2006 by Zheng et al. And was thought to be a new taxon related to Tyrannosaurus. Its name is derived from Chinese, which means crown dragon, and 2 individuals are known, a partially complete adult and a nearly complete juvenile, and they come from the Oxfordian stage of the tiny Synchrolasso Formation. So it was first discovered, as I mentioned, in the digital area as the China for a joint expedition with the Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology and Paleoanthropology and George Washington University, and named by Xi Jinping and others by 2006. Name means crown dragon. The epithet Wukani, which means to multicolored, so it's refers to the rocks it was found in, so it's the multicolored crown dragon, basically. As I mentioned, there's also 2 different specimens. The holotype is originally complete, a partially adult, articulated adult, and then an immature specimen is the paratype that's nearly complete. It was actually presumed to be trampled after death by the adult, and the crest of the immature specimen is notably smaller, so that's why the adults had a larger, more extensive snout. And this is believed to be partly because there was a mating structure, so bigger crests on adults, would mean, hey, I'm ready to breed, things like that. So that's quite interesting, and probably would have used as a display. So in terms of its size, these guys were relatively small theropods that reach about 3 to 3.5 meters, or about 9 to 11 feet, and weighed about 125 kilograms, or about 276 pounds in body mass. Its fossils were found in the Shirogashio Formation about 160 million years ago in the Oxfordian stage of the late Jurassic, and is 92 million years before its relative or descendant Tyrannosaurus rex. And so even though these guys are called Proceratosaurs, they were originally thought to be related to things like Ceratosaurus, but it turns out they're actually more closely related to things like Tyrannosaurus. So the group stuck. Things like Proceratosaurus and Sinotyrannus were originally thought to be more related to Ceratosaurus rather than Tyrannosaurus, but it's funny how things work out that way. And the bipedal descendants show many traits. They have a large trait on their head, but unlike later tyrannosaurs, they do have a crest, and they also have 3 fingers, while a lot of later tyrannosaurs like Davidasaurus and Tyrannosaurus only have 2. And they also have a coat of feathers, so that's evidence that says that T-Rex may have had feathers, or may have lost it, That classic debate with what dinosaurs had feathers and didn't. I've already gone over it probably 1,000 times, my opinions on feathers on dinosaurs is pretty clear, I think, but still cool. But yeah, these guys in a recent study, they were thought to clade with Proceratosaurus and Galadensis and a family Proceratidae that includes Stoxosaurus, Jurotarat, and Simotyrannus. However, they found that Stoxosaurus and Jurotarat was outside this family, so the only members of Proceratosauridae at the moment is Guanlong, Proceratosaurus, Calixus, and Sinotyrannus. So quite interesting as well, they were determined by histology, so the adult individual would have been matured at about 7 years of age and died at about 12, while the juvenile would died at 6 and was still growing. And as these individuals are different ages, you can see the kind of track of the growth. And the juvenile, the crest was shorter, the orbits were also larger, the lower legs were longer, and the pubic bone was less exposed. And other features are first found and more derived to Clitorosaurus and Tyrannosaurus. So it's very similar like how animals grew. Typically animals get to be have bigger eyes, more leggy, and they get bigger and thicker and smaller eyes as they grow older. So it fits the pattern with a lot of dinosaurs. And Guanlong, you can see, also has that crest. It was often used for display and is similar to those of animals such as Dilophosaurus and Monolophosaurus, and was thought to be highly pneumatized or highly empty, so lots of air in it. However, it was more delicate than other genera and possibly could have been larger, more elaborate, could have had a casque and things like that. And they were thought to be for like species recognition and species like Dilophosaurus and Monolophosaurus, but these guys were most likely, because it's more thin, it would have to be used for some sort of display purposes. But yeah, quite cool. Definitely a big fan. You can also see, on the toes there, you can see it's based on a raptor rig. I think it's whatever raptor it is. Very interesting. Cool animal. Definitely a big fan. And the guests, we do not care about them. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little about this Allosaurus. So this is by Master Dude. He's remade his really cool Allosaurus life stages mod. So he's changed up a few species and added some new things. So we're going to be first having a look at the juvenile model, and we'll talk a little bit about the juvenile stuffs, which is quite interesting. There's a cool guy here. So Allosaurus is actually... That's not what I wanted. Allosaurus is actually a dinosaur we know quite a lot about, which is really cool. Let's see if I can get a good... Let's have a look at you there. So Allosaurus, really well known, lots of different specimens, a few different species described as I'll get into. So, but there is a juvenile specimen known that actually shows that these guys had, with a nearly complete hind limb, that showed that these guys were, their legs were longer than those in juveniles. And the lower segments of the legs were actually a little bit longer as well. So this actually suggests that young and adult Allosaurus actually had different ecologies. So this suggests that younger Allosaurs were actually faster and then employed different hunting strategies as adults. So these guys most likely hunted smaller prey and chasing things, while larger allosaurs, because of their size, became ambush hunters and hunted larger prey. So these guys would have been more adaptive to changing small things, potentially things like small dinosaurs, any small things. And then once they got big, they can hunt things like your stegosaurs and small sauropods and things like that, which is quite cool. And the thigh bone is actually thicker and becomes thicker and wider during growth. And the cross section, as muscle attachments shifted, muscles became shorter, and the growth of legs slowed. And this implies that juvenile legs had less predictable stress compared to adults, and sort of moved with more regular forward progression. So these guys would have already been running around a lot more compared to adults. And conversely, the skull bones are actually thought to have grown isometrically, so that increases with size. So these guys had comparatively small skulls. As they guys get bigger, they get bigger skulls, probably stronger, better to deal with stresses of dealing with larger animals. So it's kind of a really cool way of showing, how dinosaurs grow up. So based on histology of a lot of the bones, these guys would have kind of stopped growing at about 22 to 28 years old, which is actually comparable to a lot of other theropods, things like Tyrannosaurus. And maximum growth would have been about age 15, where they put on about 150 kilograms in that year, which is really interesting. So these guys would have been quite fast, quite slow, fast growers. These guys would have kind of lived fast down here, kind of thing. But yeah, really, really cool that we get to see a juvenile as well. Really, really awesome. Definitely a big fan. So we're also going to talk a little bit about the taxonomic history of Allosaurus. So there's quite a few different species that have been described. Some have stuck, some haven't. But at the moment, there's about 3 different species. We're going to have a look at the European one. This is Europus. It's a really awesome pattern as well. Let's see if we can get a little... We'll have a look at you like that. Look at that pose there. Really, really nice. So this is Allosaurus europus, or Europus. So this was found in Portugal, and material was found in 1999, and is a partial skeleton that includes quadrate, vertebrae, ribs, gastralia, chevrons, part of the legs and hips and things like that. It was assigned to A. fragilis, but the subsequent discovery of a partial skull and neck actually spurred to be named a new species. This is the Lahairina formation, has things also like the Hyraeosaurus and Torvosaurus guernii and things like that. So it's described as a new species. So this is Europeanensis by Octavio Mateus and colleagues. And the species, a lot of allosaur species are described by cranial differences. So that's the main way a lot of people kind of tell them apart. So there's a lot of way to tell the differences. And however, though, more material may show that it could be A. fragilis, as originally described. So it may be its own species or just a European population of fragilis, which is quite interesting. There's been lots of different species named of... about 6 different species have been named of Allosaurus, but recently only about 3 have stuck. And if you don't include Allosaurus maximus, which is often considered Sauroposeidon. So that's kind of the 3 ones there. There's not any unique characteristics compared to these ones. So this species may go in the future, which will obviously just leave it to 2. But this is the 3rd European species, which may be one. There's not really many diagnostic traits. Dinosaur paleontology is like that. People just like to name new species and don't really give many traits. A lot of other fields be like, why are you naming new species over things so little information? But paleontologists will be paleontologists. No harm, no foul. Yeah, this is Europus, so this is the European one. Would have lived with Torvosaurus guernii, Lahairinosaurus, and things like that. Miragaia, a lot of those kind of animals. But yeah, really, really cool. Love the design on this one as well. I love that kind of crest there. You can see that slight difference in the skull, and it really does enough to make it distinct. And I love the color. Really, really nice. So we'll let you run off and do your thing. So next up, we've got the type species for Allosaurus. We've got Allosaurus fragilis. So this is Allosaurus fragilis. As I mentioned, this is the one that's like the type species. Most Allosaurus depictions will be the species. So these guys are the type species, and this was a species named by Marsh in 1877, and is known from at least 60 individuals, found from the Cambrian, Tithonian, Upper Cretaceous age Morrison Formation, and has been found in places such as Colorado, Montana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. And these are the, kind of the one that you think of, and most of the studies are done on specimens of Fragilis. And details of the humerus were once used to be diagnostic among these theropods, but A. jimsoni, the next species we'll go on about, has indicated that's not really true. So a lot of these, the two species I mentioned, A. fragilis and jimsoni, actually have been found all across America. And A. fragilis is considered to be the most common. And for a while as well, there was a split to another species, Allosaurus atrox, but then lumped back in again. But there is this difference with jimsoni, which is also the difference as well. And this may be the species that Sauroposeidon may be lumped, Europaensis may be lumped into, so it might just be European A. fragilis. So this is kind of the one. If they all got lumped, this would be the species that would, prevail in the end, Allosaurus fragilis, which is quite interesting. And there's lots of synonyms as well to go into as well, but we'll have a look at these guys. We'll next have a look at the next species. So we'll let them run off and do their thing. And I know they're going to do their walk around thing while I'm right here. Of course they do. We're going to do it right there, mate. Oh, no, he's quit it. Okay, so let's have a look at our last one. So this is, I know you guys love walking with dinosaurs. So this is a walking dinosaur skin, and I'll explain why it is this way. So let's have a look at Allosaurus jimsoni. So you can see it's got that very characteristic, not Jurassic Park, walking with dinosaurs colors to it. We all love it, and I'll explain why it is. So this guy is the newest species described and has been scientifically described based on two pretty much complete individuals. So the first specimen was unearthed by the Dinosaur National Monument in northeastern Utah, and this is where the original Big Owl specimen kind of was recognized as the species. So originally, Big Owl was considered fragilis, but now has been described as their own species, and with another specimen, Big Owl. So this individual is now to be considered Allosaurus jimsoni, not fragilis. And the species, there's several anatomical differences and strategical differences. So there's a difference in the jugal or the cheekbone, and it's also found in a lower margin. So these guys are found like a little bit earlier than fragilis, so it's kind of an earlier species. And fossils have been confirmed from the salt wash member of the Morrison Formation, while A. fragilis is only found in the higher, the younger rocks, like the Bushy Basin member. And as mentioned, taxonomy being taxonomy, it's going to be one of those things that it's like, it's going to change all the time. But yeah, these are the kind of the recognized species. So the most recent species, according to Daniel Chu and Mark Lowen et al. In 2020, the only species that are valid are A. fragilis, A. europaensis, and Allosaurus jimsoni. The Europus may not be characteristic enough to really be different. Though if you look at the skulls of certain specimens, there are some differences between them. But we'll have a look at some of the differences here. We'll go in a little bit more detail. So we can see this is Europus. You can see a very interesting skull there. Based on the specimen, it's got a little bit of, a hump there going on. Not quite as defined crest. A little bit shorter there. It's based on the skulls. There's a good chart on the Wikipedia that shows you the diagnostic features or diagram to show you the differences. And plus, the Europaensis is not quite as well known as fragilis and jimsoni, so it's kind of hard to tell. So as I mentioned, these are the Europaensis, or Europus, if you say that. Let's see if we can find fragilis. So this is fragilis, or fragilimus. So fragilis, you can see it's got kind of that much more like a rounded head, much more round, much bigger crest as well. Also, it's rather hard to see in the skull, but it's got much more like flatter mouth. And there's some minor differences that Juno's about a bit. In jimsoni's, you can see the difference as well. Got a much longer skull, so you can see the difference there. If you put them side by side, you kind of notice, but you can pause it or look at the Wikipedia. There's a diagram of their skulls. You can have a look, so you can see the kind of difference here as well. A little bit of a longer skull, teeth go a little bit further back. a little bit of a bigger crest as well. So this guy has quite a big crest and a little bit longer skull. So it's really cool to see the differences, and they're not huge differences. Like again, there's species level differences, but does look rather nice. I'm definitely a really big fan of how this guy's come out. And nice to see some Walking with Dinosaurs love. How can you not love Walking with Dinosaurs? And because it's Big Al, you know, Ballad of Big Al, he's now considered a new species. Fitting to give it, you know, Big Al colours, because I love Big Al. A really nice, you know, Walking with Dinosaurs, one of the best, if not the best documentary, up there with Prehistoric Planet and things like that. Really, really awesome. So, nice dude, kill it again. Love his remasters. He's actually going through back a bit and remastering a lot of his stuff, so I'll be recovering some of his stuff as well, which would be quite cool. But yeah, I think today this will be a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified for anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.